What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. I'm really excited about this week. Not only are there so many fights to talk about, a lot of cool things that have happened since we last convened, but we have the return of a very good friend of mine who has been a little bit MIA on some of the fight stuff on Twitter lately, and I haven't been past his house to eat Popeye's chicken sandwiches and tell dirty jokes, but happy to have the man on the screen beside me here, Mr. Matt Hunter, the hipster. Matt, what's going on?
It's great to be back, man. First off, just thank you for inviting me back. It's been, I feel like months since I've been on the show. And honestly, I just like being on the show for Jay and Ben. I love Jay and Ben. I love talking about MMA with them. And this is always fun. I talk to Ant enough. Like, we text and stuff, and it's whatever. He big leagues me all the time. But Jay and Ben, genuine people on this show. So I'm excited to talk MMA with them.
We only invited you back to talk about the Logan Paul fight.
I hate you all.
So tell us about the state of boxing today.
I hate all of it.
Is boxing dying? All right. All right. So, of course, we're going to introduce the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, the senior editor of SureDoc.com, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on, my man?
As you can tell, I'm in a fine mood this evening. Always lovely to see you guys. Definitely a pleasure to have Matt back on. And hell, we don't have some stuff to talk about, don't we?
Yes,
Wait,
yes.
Fights happened this weekend?
Yeah, a couple people got punched this weekend. Just a couple people. So of course, now the panel every week is anchored by the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers. He is the associate editor of SureDoc.com, Mr. Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on, brother?
To be totally honest, I was actually feeling a little burned out after this weekend because we've had 23 consecutive weekends of fight cards, and oh my God, it's event. But this show is a real bright spot, and to have Hunter back, I feel like we need to have Hunter around more often, just to kind of complete the Brady Bunch square we have going here. So with that fun, I'll share the stat of the week, and it's a good one, and it's the number 21. And y'all probably know why 21 is a very impressive number, because Deiveson Figueiredo, the flyweight champion of the UFC, engaged in the quickest turnaround of any champion to try and defend their belt. He fought at the headliner of UFC 256, but 3 weeks ago, he fought Alex Perez. And that blows away the old record of 8 weeks, 56 days for Matt Hughes and Ronda Rousey. So Deiveson Figueiredo, man, I don't think anyone can ever beat that record. I don't think, just with commissions and suspensions, and that's just one of those that's going to stand the test of time, I think.
Definitely. It'll be a very long time if ever that record gets broken. Jay, I hate to put you on the spot, but does that record apply for the challenger as well? Because Brandon Moreno was on the same 21-day turnaround.
I'm assuming it would break that record, but to have the challenger fight for two title fights, I think that's way, like, you'd have to look for like instant rematches to get that record. So, like a Wonder Boy Woodley, that kind of instant rematch back-to-back thing. So yeah, you can safely say that record is probably good too, unless you can. Derek Lewis is the only one that I can think of that would be close, fighting Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, because he fought at 229 and then fought the main event at 230. So yeah,
I think that's more.
There was a little more time that passed in there, if I'm not mistaken. But
so.
Either way, still quite an accomplishment for both gentlemen. And while we're on the subject of the main event of UFC 256, we'll just throw this out as our swing or miss, gentlemen. Is Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno the fight of 2020? Matt, I'll begin with you.
Combat sports in its entirety, or just MMA?
Just MMA, because you're going to start referring to some esoteric boxing match between and some fighters that we ain't never heard of, and you'll know all the backstories and Mr. Fight Encyclopedia. We don't have time for your show off and bullshit shenanigans, okay, buddy?
This is probably fight of the year off the top of my head. Though I would have to maybe get reminded of the fights by the lovely panel here to change my mind. But God, this had everything I wanted. Plus, at the end of the fight, I legitimately did not want any of them to. I didn't want either one to win. Like, it was in that position where I didn't really feel like I could pick who won it. I wasn't scoring the fight too live. but it was just so close. It was so competitive. It was so violent and fun. I didn't want there to be a clear winner because I know in the UFC that we weren't going to get a rematch to this fight immediately, but now I think we will, and I'm okay with that. Both guys are relatively in their prime. I think the flyweight division is a division that has a ton of contenders right now. So yeah, I loved the outcome of it and obviously how great it was. Like, it was just a fantastic fight.
Jay and Ben, was this your fight of the year?
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go with it. Number 2. It's the number 2 spot. And that is not to take away. If you want to break it up for men's fight of the year, yeah, it is. It beats Poirier, Hooker, and some other messes that you can, go down the list. But Weili Zhang and Jan Jacare just has to be that fight. It was just that Matt hit it right in the nose. It was that violent fight that only you're at the edge of your seat. I'm writing play-by-play for Sherdog, and I'm just staring at the screen, freaking out. Oh my God, how is this still happening? One of those, how are they still standing? How are they still throwing that hard? How are they, not just completely gassed out? Just everything. Under normal circumstances, you could probably look back and compare this fight to some previous fights of the years, and it might trump some of those. I kind of refer to it as just that kind of fight. You're like, everyone needs to watch it. It's absolute mayhem. It's competitive. It's compelling. Both fighters have their moments. There's questions about who's going to win, who's going to score it. There's fake narratives in the middle of it, like broken arms that don't exist, and just hit everything. It was the perfect storm kind of fight. But so was Weili Zhang and Jan Jacare with the added additional third fighter growing mid-fight. It was just one of those things. So yeah, this is right there. I'm gonna miss, but that's just because of the earlier this year, that fight.
I have a feeling, Ben, that you are going to echo those sentiments. Am I correct?
I am. I will say this. This is the first fight this year since March 7th or whenever that fight was that even made me think about it. Everything else, it was like, oh, that can go on the list. This one, midway through the 3rd round into the 4th round, I was like, is this going to be the fight of the year? I thought this shit was sewn up. After thinking about it, I still do give it to Weili versus Joanna. And here's the difference for me. One, I'm not completely against the point deduction, but it does take just a little shine off that the outcome of the fight was directly determined by the referee. But nonetheless, if not for my other points, I still think this could have been fight of the year. The tiebreaker for me is that about 2 minutes into the 5th round, I yelled at my screen, Deiveson, I don't know if you think you got this, Sona, but you need to do something. Like, the 5th round slowed down to the point that Figueiredo won it almost by default. By comparison, in Weili versus Joanna, they were both getting it in the 5th round. Like, that round was up for grabs, and each of them was still trying to finish the other. Tired or not, beat up or not, tag team partner in the cage on top of Joanna's face or not, like, they were still going after it. It also does add to my enjoyment of that fight that I watched it in person with a prospering UFC welterweight who shall go nameless, and he looked at me and was like, what do you think is in that thing?
Bad intentions.
And just to add to what Ben and Jay are saying, that's probably the only fight this year that I showed to a non-MMA fan. And I was like, watch this. Just watch this.
Yep.
And I guarantee you're going to love it. And that person loved it. The person that was not an MMA fan, doesn't watch MMA at all, but they wanted to watch more of that. They wanted to watch all of Joanna's fights, all of Weili's fights after that, instantly. So there is something to that fight is probably number one, just due to the level of fight it is. I think both of those women are at a higher level than Figueiredo and Moreno, just to be honest. And like Ben says, in that 5th round, they were going for the kill when they were both dead, basically. Like, both women were at their end with cardio, with anything, and they were still doing at their utmost ability to win the fight and win that round.
Yeah, I think definitely very good points there too. I have to put that as my number 2 fight of the year behind Weili and Joanna. for a couple of reasons. I mean, the main one being the foul. To have such an action-packed fight between Weili and Joanna, it goes the full 25 minutes, and to my recollection, there was not a single foul in that fight. I don't remember an eye poke. I definitely don't remember. I mean, clearly no nut shots for obvious reasons, but there weren't any fouls in there and if there weren't anything that kind of slowed the momentum of the action. They kept a non-stop pace. There was no fifth round break. There was nothing like that. I think as much as we enjoy what we saw Saturday night, we have to remember that we're halfway into the third round. From that point on, it was a compromised product that we received. There is no way that you can take a growing shot so hard that you're coughing up blood. Like Moreno was coughing up blood on his knees in the corner. And then this person is going out there and performing at 100%. That just doesn't exist. There's no man can do that. And as amazingly as he performed after that, that still wasn't the full capabilities that he possessed. I think it's another thing too to keep in mind the expectations that we had leading into each fight. I was one of the camp thinking that Weili would have ran through Joanna. I remember kind of standing out on this show saying something like that. But if I'm remembering this correctly, you two guys said it was going to be a closer fight, that you saw it going to decision or at least making it to the latter rounds.
I don't remember that, but I'm happy to take credit.
I think you said that. Jay, I'm pretty sure you did.
I remember that we had a discussion about would this be like a clean sweep, like a Jean Andrade kind of a bull rush and smoker versus I think that Joanna can make that shot. I think one of us probably did. I don't know which one, but it really matters to me that fifth round, because that fifth round was obviously the lull where Deiveson Figueiredo surprisingly didn't win on all three judges' scorecards to force a draw. I don't want to necessarily step on any toes about points, but the fifth round of Zhang Yo and Jacek was the most active round of all the entire fight. Like both women threw and landed more in the fifth round after 150 blows absorbed each to go all that way. So I think that it was an A fight. You give Figueiredo and Moreno an A, but Jacek and Zhang was an A plus.
Yeah,
just that little cherry on top.
That's a fair way to put it. So like I had, I'm thinking that most expectations were saying Weili and Joanna would have been a closer fight, and to exceed those expectations, I think says a lot more than Moreno being sort of a surprise challenge for Figueiredo, because I think the narrative was written by a lot of pundits, a lot of fans, that this was just going to be Deiveson just going in there and doing what he does and giving the broadcast team another way to disrespect the legacy of Demetrius Johnson, which of course they still managed to do. Throughout the event. Yeah, they still managed to do that, but just in a different way. So I'm going to miss on that main event being the best fight of the year, and still we're really ignoring the true fight of the year, and it's not Weili Joanna, it's Izzy versus Romero. So let's move along here.
That's the one.
That was the fight right there. Now, gentlemen, back to the UFC 256 main event. Are we okay with a draw? Or do we have different scorecards? Matt, I know you didn't score that live. I also did not score it live either. But if we're going on pride scoring, I thought a draw made a lot of sense, especially with the growing shot having such a negative effect on the fight. I think it's appropriate, almost poetic, that Figueiredo doesn't get the W as a result of that. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I loved, and this might sound messed up because what happened. I love that Jason Herzog took a point. I was grateful, and because you can argue it was the first grunt shot, you couldn't take that, and it wasn't an accumulation of other fouls. Like there was the eye gouge thing, I think, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. There was some sort of a warning given beforehand, but the fact that the grunt shot merited an immediate point deduction, I thought was important. because it truly did. And you said it, Ann, it changed the course of the fight. Like, this was a guy who was compromised from this strike. Took 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It's all he took to recover. And this is a guy that was on his knees, dry heaving, coughing out blood from the groin shot to get up and 2 minutes later and go, oh, all right, let's go. Yeah, you're totally 100% after that. Come on, buddy. Now, that said, I think more egregious than any of it is Junichiro Kamicho's scorecard of the 5th round, giving the 5th round to Moreno, when I didn't see any measurable metric where you could say Moreno won that round, whether it was striking, grappling, aggression, or cage control. Just I didn't see it in any way, like not just from strike totals, because strike totals don't tell the nature of the fight, but Figueiredo was outlanding him by at least 2-1 on damaging blows and on in terms of just actually physically hitting him in the face. And so if Camacho had actually scored that round properly, it would not have been a draw. It would have been a majority decision. And I can see that because I scored the fight 48-46 for Figueiredo to win the fight. And yeah, that 5th round was more problematic and discussion worthy than the groin shot for me personally.
You know, I'll say the eye poke was worse to me than the groin shot, at least as far as what it looked like. I mean, the groin shot had a bigger effect, but I don't want to throw accusations out there, but the way Figueiredo dug that hand into your man's eye from that position, it was like, oh, whew, that looked like some bar fighting techniques right there. Like that, as a Krav Maga practitioner, I almost felt proud looking at that.
So Mike Kyle special is what you're saying?
Yeah, man, that was. I mean, even John Jones wouldn't eye poke in that position. Like he wouldn't do that.
You should have to like scream Krav Maga as a key eye would be like Krav Maga.
I mean, he had the full package. He had the groin shot. He had the eye gouge. I mean, that's Krav Maga right there.
He's got to get the groin shot.
Krav Maga hat trick right there. You know.
Yeah. All he needed is a shot to the throat, and we're in business here. Like we're talking 2nd degree black belt. Ben, what was your scorecard?
48-46. I scored the 3rd round 9-9 because of the point deduction. Then I gave the 4th round to Moreno straight up, and I'm not mad at any result, honestly. You know, I would have been happier if there were a clear-cut result. Again, Camijo's 5th round scorecard really does screw it up for me because however you felt about the foul and how it was called, if Camijo had scored the 5th round like somebody who wasn't taking a bathroom break at the time, it still would have been a majority decision for Figueiredo. Everybody goes home happy because it was an extremely close fight. Decision says it was an extremely close fight. Like dissenting scorecards doesn't necessarily mean that one of the judges screwed it up. You've got 3 people looking at the cage from different angles. So a certain technique looks harder and looks more effective, whether the guy's backs were turned to you or facing you. And different people, even if they're doing their job well, they value different things slightly differently. So I wouldn't have been mad at a majority decision for Figueiredo. The draw does kind of stick in my throat a little bit, but either way, it means we're probably going to get to see this again in a 5-round capacity sooner than later. So all might be well that ends well. Yeah. Although, just like Wonder Boy versus Woodley, this is one that will not be able to live up to this the next time around. I just hope it's not as bad as Woodley too. Like too much respect for the other man's weapons. You know, is that second one. So hopefully not that.
Yeah, just be prepared to be disappointed when these two meet again. So I think as long as we go in there with tempered expectations, all's well as ends well, as you said, Ben. So let's move on to the co-main event. Very surprising to a lot of folks here. Charles Bronx Oliveira completely handled Tony Ferguson in every way, shape, and form, earning a 30-26 across all 3 judges' scorecards. The media scorecards are much less forgiving. Drake Riggs, my colleague at Body Lock and former guest on this show, I think he had it a 30-24. He saw a clean sweep, all 10-8s. I saw a lot of 30-25s as well. I mean, this was a savage beating that the former interim title holder took. So now what do you do with Charles Oliveira here? We've got Conor and Dustin Poirier rematching in January. We have, the retirement of Khabib Nurmagomedov that everybody is not accepting that isn't named Nurmagomedov. So, fellas, what do you do next with Charles Oliveira?
Fight Nurmagomedov. Like that's what, like, honestly you should do, or fight the championship, whether it's for a vacant belt, whether, the winner of Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier. Like, I don't know what it is, but he should fight for a belt next, right? Like, who else is in line realistically that's on this much of a winning streak? The guy hasn't lost in 2 years. He's on 7 fights, 8 fight winning streak.
8 now.
I would say not all those wins are great. Obviously, beat up some older veterans, of course, but Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson back to back are fantastic wins. And maybe those scorecards are a little bit harsh, but he was utterly dominant here. Like, I thought he was going to win this fight heading into it due to Tony Ferguson taking such a beating in his last fight. And I'm not having faith in Tony Ferguson in terms of his mental capacity at this point in time. That's just honesty. That's just how I think. I did not expect Charles Oliveira to dominate him in that capacity. So, yeah, give him a shot at the belt. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Any other ideas of what you want to do with Bronx?
Well, I think it's more of a question of what the UFC wants to do. Everything they're doing right now really points to them trying to tease Nurmagomedov back out of retirement. Yes. And I said this after his last fight. There has never been a top-level fighter in the history of mixed martial arts that I believe more than Khabib Nurmagomedov when he said he quit. Just, it all falls into place. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't care about the celebrity past a certain point. He's always done this on his own terms. It's one of the cool things about him. And so I still do believe him, but the UFC clearly, they're like, Jim Carrey going, so you're saying there's a chance? There is a reason they have not removed him from the top of their lightweight rankings yet, because those rankings change on a whim. I mean, they pulled Leon Edwards because they were mad at him. So if they've left Khabib at the top of those rankings, it is for a reason. And for them to leave him at the top of those rankings, but then install Conor as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, which he is right now, they're trying to tease him back out. What the UFC wants is for Conor to dust Poirier next month.
Yeah.
And see if they can get Khabib to come back for one last giant fight. Pitch it to him. Hey, 30-0. Think of all the Sambo schools you can build in Dagestan with the $15 million we will give you. You swing off into the sunset and you beat that loudmouth asshole one more time. Like, that's going to be the pitch to Khabib. If that's what's going to happen, then keep the Bronx busy by making him fight Gaethje or something. Otherwise, Conor versus Poirier is for the interim title, and they, that person ends up getting promoted to the undisputed title when Khabib won't come back, and let the Bronx fight that guy.
Don't be surprised if, and this is something that Dana was saying, that he's going to sit down and have a meeting with Khabib next month, before 257 happens with Conor and Poirier up for grabs. Don't be surprised if we have a sudden championship announcement implications for that fight. Don't be at all surprised if it's now for gold. It's now for an interim. It's now for the undisputed. This is something that is going to happen on a Tuesday, and it's just going to be like, there we go, let's do it. 257 for the real belt. Conor's going to get the, that's the push that you can almost see coming here, that this is the UFC doing this. But I'm with Hunter. I want Oliveira to fight for a title next. I am sick and tired of needing a 9-fight, 10-fight win streak to get a title shot in a division. It's ludicrous when you compare it to fighters that are on 1-fight win streaks and getting title shots over them. Like, how many
1-fight losing streaks if you're Jose Aldo?
Negative 1-fight win streaks.
I mean, how many so going down my train of thought that Conor Poirier 2 is probably going to be for the title. How many fights has Conor McGregor won at lightweight in the last 4 years? Because that's 0. So he's going to get a title shot over somebody else because they want to push this guy and they're very excited about him, pay-per-view buys, blah, blah, blah. Whereas Tony Ferguson had to win 12 fights to get an interim belt again and fight Justin Gaethje for the interim belt again after losing it when he injured himself in the middle of an interview when he tripped over the cable on the camera. I am over needing crazy win streaks if you're not already a designated star for the company. I feel like there shouldn't be two levels of celebrity and fighter. And I know there will be, because this is entertainment as much as just sport, but I hate the notion that if you're not a superstar, if you're not a pay-per-view headliner type, you're going to need to get 8-9 wins, versus Conor McGregor could lose to Dustin Poirier and find himself falling upwards into a Khabib fight should Khabib come back. You can see that happen. So I don't know. I just give Oliveira has earned it. He's beaten, enough guys, and he's beaten some great guys. Who would have said that Oliveira would get a 10-8 on Tony Ferguson with his grappling? I mean, without getting a submission and ripping limbs off. What? Who would have thought that Oliveira would scoop up Ferguson and very gently slam him hard to the ground and go, wait a second. People don't do that to Tony Ferguson. So if he didn't earn it with that performance, I don't know what does anymore.
And let me add to that very briefly. He also outstruck Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
I mean,
and he ripped his arm off in the first round.
I think we forget that Charles Oliveira was like 21 years old when he was like debuting in the UFC and had like a bunch of losses to top 10 competition at like 21 years old. And now he's 31 years old. It's a decade later. He's now matured. He's actually in his prime. I think people forget that in a lot of ways. That he's almost like a Brazilian Robbie Lawler in that sense, that he's going to have this rebound, even though we saw him already at the elite level. We only saw him at the elite level at the very early age, the very onset of his career. So that kind of offset our perception of him. But if Ben's right, and Ben could be right with his like prophecy of what's going to happen with the lightweight division, the only fight Oliveira should take is probably like RDA, who just picked up a good win against Paul Felder. Like Islam Makhachev, like I'm not intrigued by that enough. Like he should still fight established names. RDA is probably the only one that makes sense because he's coming off a win. Everyone else is coming off a loss or busy. So that is probably realistic in terms of what's next for Oliveira if he doesn't get a title shot.
I think one thing that's very important to remember on the broadcast for the event, when they were doing the teaser for Conor and Poirier, they said that there was another big fight that they were planning on adding. So you just got to think, what would that big fight be? Now, I would expect in the COVID age where we can almost automatically just start scratching names off of the final roster for the final event card. I would expect that to be a lightweight fight that they're going to put there, because you'd want to have some mixing and matching. I'd suspect Justin Gaethje would be in that mix, probably Charles Oliveira and or Michael Chandler, and some sort of mix of those names. I could see being on that card just in case Dustin gets sick or something like that. That seems to be the direction they're probably heading in. So we have to keep that in mind as we're matchmaking. That being said, Charles Oliveira deserves some level of title recognition. If they do a vacant belt, it shouldn't be for Conor to have one win at lightweight in, was it 2016? Mm-hmm. To then kind of stroll his way 5 years later to some sort of lightweight gold. That doesn't make any sense to me. Poirier, even, granted, he had a great victory over Dan Hooker, but it just wasn't that long ago that we saw Khabib choking him out. So I can see a case of him not deserving it as well. I don't know.
He won't even defend the belt anyway. What's the point? It's like giving Jerian Durandamy another shot. She's not gonna. She fought at 145. Is she gonna defend it? Yeah. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, he's 0-2 on actually defending his title because he chose to, not because of injury or illness or.
And this is surely going to drive Matt up a wall, because I could see the looks on your faces when I said this a couple of weeks ago. You guys cringing when I was talking about this. But I really think that the efforts to put together Manny Pacquiao into some sort of big fight is going to have an effect on what's going to happen in this. With Pacquiao and Conor on the same management company, I think even if you put gold to this Poirier fight, this is not something that will be defended if he wins, because he's going to be looking to greener pastures. And with him under the same management, it makes it a lot more possible. And then with Terrence Crawford's recent victory, Errol Spence's recent victory, it's like, does Manny want to take those fights, or does a surefire victory over someone that he can kill without lifting his pinky
that will sell twice as many pay-per-views?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, Terrence Crawford is my favorite boxer to watch, but Conor versus Pacquiao will outsell that by at least double.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean,
to see the pain on Matt's face just make this conversation.
And I don't know if it's because you disagree or because you agree and you hate it.
Well, obviously, Pacquiao McGregor does great business. Like, we know that, just like Tyson Roy Jones just did great business and with a top 10 box pay-per-view of all time. Of all time.
I think let's give West Khalifa his credit for that being a success.
Answer, dog. Come on. Okay. I think it's a little bit simplified when we just state that they're now under the same management, therefore it's easier. I think when it comes to a type of match like that, and what's not stated, but what I'm assuming here, what I'm inferring is the issue, that there is a sort of ownership of the IP that is the conflict here. That Dana White wants to, in my opinion, use a fight like Pacquiao McGregor or Pacquiao versus anyone at this point in time to catapult Zuffa boxing. And that's the only reason we haven't gotten it yet, because there hasn't been that name in boxing that's legitimate to attach itself to Zuffa boxing to then, catapult the business off of. And I don't think Manny Pacquiao is one to want to give up sort of sovereignty or autonomy of his career, which he now has gained since leaving Top Rank, to then give that up to Zuffa boxing, Dana White, and presumably make less money because it's Dana White in the UFC. So I do think it is easier because they're under the same management, but I don't think that at all absolves the massive issue, which is the UFC / Dana White / Zuffa / WME. They want to use big-time boxers, and these big-time boxers don't like being used as much as MMA fighters. There's a massive cultural difference in how these fighters think, how these fighters conduct business, and Dana White fundamentally does not get that yet. So I'm not certain that we're going to get Pacquiao with any matchup in the near future, to be honest. Maybe he just is done. That's possible. He beat Keith Thurman. He beat a guy in this generation. Maybe he's done. That's possible. He has one fight left with Al Heyman. Is that going to be Mikey Garcia? Is that going to be Conor McGregor? I don't know. Is that going to be Saudi Arabia with a ton of money? I don't know. Maybe it depends on COVID right now as well, because I know Saudi Arabia has locked down a lot of things due to COVID. So it's just a wait and see with Pacquiao. And it's just, again, simplified too much when we just say that they're under the same management, therefore it's easier now.
So what you're saying is boxing is broken. Is that what you're saying here?
Zuffa boxing is broken.
No, Dana's going to fix it. Zuffa boxing is going to clean up boxing
by paying top boxers $500,000.
If there's an upside to this conversation, so Dana White finally admitted defeat on Zuffa boxing this past week.
Kinda.
Yeah, he kind of.
He basically
said the same thing many times.
He did everything besides admit I can't manipulate and underpay these fighters like I want to, so I can't get anything out of it. Like I can't squeeze blood from the stone. I can't get Anthony Joshua to fight for me for $300,000 or something.
Yeah.
Guys, there's boxers that are not even the co-main event getting paid $1.3 million.
He would have like blood shooting out of his nose before he'd try and pay that.
Yeah, I remember when Overeem and Barnett came over from Strikeforce, and they were getting paid like $350 a fight, and he was pissed about that, and he was saying, "Oh, they get paid way too much. These Strikeforce fighters, we inherited these bad contracts." So, yeah, boxing is broken. So, fellas, let's move on here. I'm going to give you a couple of options, and we're really not going to like any of these, but we must go ahead and choose one, or you die. So choose or perish. Which legendary Brazilian needs to hang things up after Saturday night? Jacare Souza or Junior dos Santos? Gentlemen.
Oh, Junior dos Santos. I'm all over this. Junior dos Santos. I mean, both of these guys, it hurts me to say in both cases. They're easy fighters to root for. And it's been sad to see the direction they're going. But Jacare Souza is still barely 1 year removed from arguably beating your current UFC light heavyweight champion, Jan Blachowicz. That is a year ago. You can argue that he's dilapidated since then, but he is not that far removed from being an extremely competitive fighter. He's a man without a home weight class wise, it sure seems, and he's done fighting top 10 fighters as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not as concerned for him as I am for Junior dos Santos. Junior dos Santos, I mean, he's younger than Souza, but this has been coming down the pike for a long time. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. They're all knockouts. They're ugly knockouts. He's not really been competitive in any of them. I'm frankly surprised at this point, looking back, that Dos Santos has accomplished as much as he has since Cain Velasquez essentially beat the physical prime out of him. I mean, those Velasquez fights happened when JDS was like 30 years old. And he looked like the Invisible Man at one of those post-fight press conferences, just face completely bandaged up with like his eyes peeking out like from under a hat. It really is. It's remarkable what he's accomplished since his death, as this kind of revenant. But he's at the point where his game that used to work on hand speed, foot speed, chin, it's not there anymore. He is a sitting duck. He's not even a guy who can reinvent himself like Overeem or even Arlovsky to have continued success after 40. He needs, my goodness, he needs to hang it up. And like, this isn't even choose and perish. Like I choose and prosper. I would love it if Junior dos Santos hung it up at this point.
I don't always love playing devil's advocate, but I actually feel this one. I feel Dos Santos is 36 years young, and he has had some bad performances over Ngannou, Blades, Rosenstrike, and now Cyril Gane, who's a 4-1 favorite coming into the fight, who may very well be he will be a top 10 heavyweight tomorrow when the UFC rankings come out, and he has looked pretty rough in them. But heavyweights go forever. Heavyweights can go until they're 45. He has another 9 years left if we really want to hate ourselves for it. Whereas middleweights and lower weight guys, especially ones based on fast twitch and power and the ability to counter and leap in the air with knees and stuff, Jacare doesn't have that anymore. He didn't show me anything in this performance or the one against Blachowicz or the one against Hermanson that Jacare Souza was a name like Anderson Silva, where just the reputation alone, stepping in the cage, he had an advantage because it's like, crap, I can't make a mistake because Jacare will rip my arms off. Whereas he doesn't have that. Hermanson is a smart fighter. He almost choked out Jacare. And then Blachowicz, that whole fight that happened, and we let it happen and we move on from it. But the Holland fight was again that I'm not afraid of you. What are you going to do to me? I mean, this is a guy who went for a standing guillotine. Kevin Holland went for a standing guillotine on Jacare Souza and had him in danger. This is not a thing that works.
Dude, like Holland was on his back throwing up submission attempts and saying, I had a dream about this last night.
Like
know that your mystique is gone when a man, like you're over top of a guy and he's like, I had a dream about this last night, and he's laughing.
I think that demoralizing performance, I think that knockout, the way it was when Jacare falls over dead and he stands over pounding on him like he's in like an action movie when the hero almost beats the bad guy to death before somebody goes, stop, he's not worth it. That kind of feeling was the feeling and the pain of seeing Jacare just get absolutely crushed like that. It was an odd angle. It was the kind of thing where, he was on his side. He was kind of leaning over like Nick Diaz, Anderson Silva, and then go boosh, and just that was a knockout that made me go, I'm good. I'm good here. I don't think it's going to look better. It's not going to be prettier. And we always talk about this. These hot name guys that are the former champions, the former top 5 guys will never get an easy fight again. And sure, Junior dos Santos won't either. But he'll be able to fight a Marcin Tybura. He'll be able to fight well, he already fought Ben Rothwell a while ago, but he'll be able to find another guy. Maybe, hey, what the heck? I don't think he and Andre Arlovski ever fought. Actually, that's a fight, and that's sad, but that's a fight. Whereas I don't see anything for Jacare, and I don't want to see him fight Derek Brunson again. I don't want to see him fight, the corpse of Chris Weidman again. I just don't want to see any of these fights. So give me Jacare. I'm good, buddy.
I'll put it this way. Jay, you presented a great argument because I was going to come on here and pour out my heart for JDS as I put him out of his misery. But that was a good argument. I'll give you the credit. That was a really fantastic argument that you crafted there, but you're wrong. The first ever UFC event I ever went to was JDS versus Cain Velasquez, the first fight. First ever event I ever went to. First ever MMA event I went to as well, at least professionally. I went to amateur stuff, but professionally, that was the first ever event I went to. So I've always been a JDS fan. I mean, I watched him when he beat Verdum in his debut. I've always loved JDS. I've always liked boxers, of course. So JDS is one of the better boxers of at least during his run in the heavyweight division. So I've always been a fan of him. But Ben is right. He has been beaten up, abused, exploited, knocked out, and seemingly all of his fights lately.
Yeah.
He's lost 3 fights this year alone via knockout.
He's been finished 4 times consecutively.
I don't want to see that anymore. It does feel like I'm watching a puppy being put out there to get beat up and abused. Every time I see JDS in a fight now, I think he's going to get knocked out. I immediately think that. Now with Jacare, I may think that he's fighting at least elite competition. I'm thinking, he's not the same Jacare anymore. He's not going to win anymore. I'm never thinking that he's going to get brutalized in a way. I'm not worried about his health. I'm worried about JDS's health at this point in time. So that emotional part to it, I think, takes over. So yeah, JDS has to be put out of his misery. I apologize, JDS. Big fan.
Yeah, Jay, you couldn't be more off the mark with this one, man. JDS has been annihilated 4 times in a row here, in just violent highlight reel fashion. Has been just iced. It's been pretty sad to see his decline. And the thing is, we've seen multiple levels of decline with him over the years. I think Ben hit it right there perfectly, where the Cain trilogy took so much out of him. We saw a noticeable decline in him at that point. And then, not to throw allegations out there, but USADA seemed to take a toll on him as well. I do distinctly remember him looking very different and fighting very differently when he fought his first post-USADA fight. I believe that was against Alistair Overeem when he got knocked out there. JDS just doesn't have the type of style that can translate to aging, and he's in the wrong division as far as taking shots to the chin, what that power is going to feel like. Jacare, on the other hand, I don't think Jacare has much longer in him. This is not a case saying that Jacare is going to rebound after a fight in a few months. I don't believe that's the case at all. But I think we can be a little more forgiving of his performance Saturday. While it may be very demoralizing to have someone talk about their dreams as you're trying to apply some level of damage to them while you're in top position, is there any way you would think in a rational world that someone gets knocked out in that position? I don't think anyone would expect a shot that hard. I think that can catch just about anyone off guard and result in them being asleep on the canvas. Now, I think that knockout may have lasting repercussions to where we're having this conversation again about Jacare on his next fight. But with JDS, I don't want to have that conversation again at all. We've had this conversation about JDS several times recently, and we had this conversation before earlier in his career in the aforementioned declines that he suffered from before. I think it's time for JDS to walk out and accept his roses. Get that Hall of Fame ceremony, give your tearful speech in front of whatever level of crowd that COVID allows us to have, and call it a day, man, coach, and just be a smiling face sitting cage side from here on out. I don't want to see JDS get hurt again.
Well, here's my most depressing stat of the week then. Junior dos Santos has 5 fights left on his UFC contract.
Oh.
Signed an 8-fight deal going to the Blades fight.
Well, hey, Romero had 4 fights left on his deal, and now he's a Bellator fighter. So I think he. I mean, we talked about this a bit last week about possible names that are on the chopping block. I think JDS is the poster child for this, and quite frankly, we're gonna hear statements from Scott Coker and Chatri Sityatung and Ray Sefo about how. They don't want to sign JDS, and maybe they sign him a week. Maybe they sign him a week later because they all be lying. We know Dave Feldman be lying if he were to say that. So
Feldman would say absolutely.
So,
Feldman
JDS,
say, come on.
So JDS versus Mir 2 in bare knuckle 6 months from now.
I'm in. Let's do it.
I mean, that's the level of depravity we're going to
co-main event, the Paige Van Zandt card. Let's go.
Yeah. Or let's dig up Bigfoot Silva again, see what he's up to. Like
he's actually fighting in BKFC. He fought Gabriel Gonzaga.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So there we go. All right, fellas, let's move along here because we are now going to talk about why we have the seasoning salt, the paprika. Y'all know about the paprika. That's brothers know about that. The cracked pepper and whatnot. To season this crow. Matt, tell us, why are you eating crow this week? What did you have wrong?
I'll put it this way. I really kind of threw Mackenzie Dern like in the bin. Like I didn't think she was really going to evolve at all. I didn't think she was really going to improve her her style at all, her ability at all. And I saw marked improvement in her ability in this fight. So I will admit full crow here that maybe Mackenzie Dern has an ability to be a top 10 contender to some degree. Maybe not a champion. I don't see that for her still, but somebody that belongs with the top, absolutely. We see someone that is improving their overall game and improving it drastically as well. And I've always been one of those people when looking at prospects, it doesn't matter if they're the complete package. I just want to see improvement. Because no prospect obviously is the complete package. So I want to see vast improvement from fight to fight. And that shows you how good a prospect is. I think about John Jones, the leaps he made from fight to fight, right? In terms of ability. You want to see that. And this was the first big leap we've seen from Mackenzie Dern. So shout out to her.
Yeah, definitely. Good one there. Why are you eating crow this week?
I'm sorry, was that to me? You dropped out for a sec.
Oh, sorry. Jay, why are you eating crow? This week?
I'd like to point out that there are, for some reason, critics of our betting odds piece on Sherdog Prime Picks, where they read the analysis and believe that a massive underdog pick and showing you the paths to victory is essentially writing that this big underdog is a lock. I don't think they understand that some of these betting favorites and underdogs have really good value because Junior dos Santos is a heavyweight. Heavyweights have that power where there shouldn't be many 4-1 favorites because Junior dos Santos will walk out there, hit you in the back of the head, and you fall down in a minute and blow up the Fox broadcast. So these things happen in MMA all the time. So that I want to get that off my chest. But the other major underdog, besides the fact that I suggested that Junior dos Santos has passed to victory because Cyril Ganis had at the time been a virtually untested heavyweight, is the card opener. Look, I know Peter Barrett from the New England scene. He's a Massachusetts guy. He's a straight up Sityatung guy. And by that, I mean the Joe Lozon kind of hit you in the face, start bleeding and be like, haha, you didn't hurt me. Walk you down, punch you and kick you in the face. That's the hard-nosed style. You could almost just draft up what that probably looks like. That's Peter Barrett's game plan. And he was able to succeed doing that against the immensely untalented striker, Chase Hooper, for 2.5 rounds. And I didn't see any way that Chase Hooper could win this fight. I didn't see it because, sure, he could go for a takedown and he might be able to do something with it. He probably won't keep Peter Barrett down for long because Slippery Pete got that nickname, spoiler alert, because he doesn't get submitted very often, and you have to hurt him to do it. And Chase Hooper isn't going to hurt you to, you punch him in the face and you're not a black belt anymore. He doesn't have that in him. He doesn't have any of that striking style to get your respect and attention so he can hit you, change levels, go for a attack. That's not his game. So I didn't see him winning. I expected the fight would play out the way it did. And it did. It played out like that for 2.5 rounds. And then an Imanari roll. The third or fourth or fifth attempt, by the way, ruined everything for the people who were ready to cash their slips and go, oh my God, huge underdog Peter Barrett falls into a heel hook and just kind of lets it happen. Like, your name is Slippery Pete for a reason. No. And you just kind of look at you look at that like when Randa Marcos jumped into Mackenzie Dern's guard and went, what are you going to do? Are you going to armbar me? Oh, damn it. I totally forgot you can do that. That was the heel hook. Then he just kind of shrugged it off and got tapped out. And, you know, I'm eating crow because neither fighter are UFC material, but I guess one has to be now because they want to fight in the UFC. I don't know. Doesn't taste very good, though.
Yeah, I guess the only person more upset by that Imanari roll to the finish had to be Roy McDonald. So Ben, tell us why you're eating crow this week.
I'm still mad about that heel hook finish. Like, I understand that it's easy for me to say from my literal armchair here, but first he didn't defend it at all, and then he basically did the exact wrong thing. It was like a professional wrestler trying to sell a leg lock. Like, I'm throwing things at my desk. Anyway, we already talked
for a special thing.
Only if it was like a 400-pound, like morbidly obese man in there. All right. We already talked about it briefly, but going into the co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson, in my Sherdog radio preview, I put Ferguson down by finish in the first 2 rounds as my lock of the night. So I could not possibly be eating any more crow right now. And I say this as somebody who, on this show, I've had a couple of probably 10-minute rants about how incredibly improved Charles the Bronx Oliveira is since he was the guy that dropped into the UFC as a 20-year-old with no team, just like armbarring friends in his garage when he came into the UFC. Just how much he's improved. And he's improved in ways that fighters normally don't improve. Like, you can get better as a striker. We just talked about Mackenzie Dern. She's gone from a terrible striker to an above average striker for the strawweight division. Like, you can improve that. Things you generally cannot improve are your chin and your fight IQ. And so I had him pegged. Like, 5 years ago, I had the book written on Charles Oliveira. This guy is a glass cannon. He is a head case. He'll always be fun to watch. He'll probably always win 2 and lose 1, but he'll lose the one in such a stupid way. And he'll never really be a title contender, but he'll probably own all the records by the time he's done. I had already been proven dead wrong going into Saturday's fight. He was on a 7-fight win streak. You don't win 7 straight fights in the toughest division in the sport if you don't have fight IQ. There's no amount of talent that can do that for you. So he'd already moved past that. The weight issues were a thing of the past. He was at 155 and he was at 155 for good and made weight without any apparent problem. But nonetheless, I just thought that Ferguson was still the absolute worst matchup for him. I looked at the Ferguson versus Gaethje fight because the thing about Tony Ferguson is if you hit Tony Ferguson, it's not just that he hits you back. It's that he turns into a wood chipper. And all of a sudden, it's just like this grinning cloud of elbows and knees, and front headlock attempts coming at you. And
like an Andy Cap.
Totally. It's like this cloud with like fists and feet and stuff, coming out of it, and like Batman sound effects like pow, biff, I said, even the new and improved Charles Oliveira will wilt at that. And I was dead wrong. I never thought I would be saying this sentence, like these words in this order, but Charles Oliveira overwhelms Tony Ferguson. And Tony Ferguson, other than Khabib Nurmagomedov, has been the most overwhelming fighter in the lightweight division for years. I was completely stunned. Some of it might be down to Ferguson being more dilapidated than I expected, but that's a cop-out. I just underestimated Charles Oliveira and the quality that he's attained as a fighter. I'm now talking about him against the very best of the best, the top 3 or 4 people in the division, in an optimistic way that I never thought I would have been. So yeah, I mean, all the crow for me. I was dead wrong about Charles Oliveira. I could not be more happy to be wrong, since he's been one of my favorite fighters ever since he was a mess. So yeah, that's my crow. Eating it all.
I want to add to that briefly. Is the Bronx like the most intriguing matchup if Khabib comes back nowadays?
I think so.
Like-
I think he threatened. He threatened.
Yeah, because he's such a submission threat. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, because we thought Tony Ferguson could have been that, and we saw how he handled Tony Ferguson. So I guess by default now he takes that mantle, but it just doesn't have his same level of historical implications and just the level of hype built into years of this fight not happening. But just the pure matchup on paper, yeah, that I'd say that's a fair assessment. All right, gentlemen. So my eating crow this week comes courtesy of someone who, much like Du Bronx is for Ben, someone that I've perpetually have written off, and they proved to deliver. That's Cub Swanson, who had a ridiculous domination knockout over Daniel Pineda. I initially thought Pineda would be able to overwhelm Swanson. I mean, he's someone that tried to ride off into the sunset a few times. He was on the wrong side of a 4-fight losing streak when he was matched up with Kron Gracie. Despite him being a true mixed martial artist and Gracie being sort of a one-trick pony, thought Swanson was like the perfect guy to find himself submitted by Gracie by his habit of catching very bad submissions. Despite his own jiu-jitsu black belt, he proved us wrong there by completely dominating Kron. And coming off of an injury, blew his knee out against Jake Shields at what was a Quintet? Yeah. To rebound from that and get a win over a guy who captured imaginations with a destruction over Herbert Burns a couple months back. Completely improbable. Did not think that was going to happen. And especially looking at the size difference between the two, Swanson had a fantastic performance, and I guess he's not done yet. So stay tuned. All right, fellas. So we're going to move things on here to something that drew my ire throughout the entire broadcast, and it's been kind of irritating me a lot more lately, and that is the commentary. Joe Rogan in particular, who seemed to be missing from the broadcast for a couple months, I believe it was, until returning for UFC 255. Well, he's back for 256, and can't say I was a big fan of the work on the mic. Are we ready for Rogan to just ride off into the podcast sunset here?
Man, for a guy who has done this as long as he's done this, to hear the commentary that and the tracks that he laid down throughout the night was very surprising to me, because yes, we know Rogan can get set in his narrative, and he can determine something. Dr. Rogan can determine something, and this is the rest of the story for the rest of the fight. There is a broken shoulder, there is an arm, there's an eye, he's got a broken orbital. Oh, his leg's injured, he can't stand up on it. That's a Roganism. That's fine. Okay. It's important to pay attention to. When I saw Brandon Moreno having issues extending his jab, I thought something was going on. Rogan kept pointing his forearm. I thought, looks kind of like a forearm that's blocked a couple kicks, but I don't see, he's putting the bone back in place. It hit all the wrong notes. And I actually said this in the Short Dog forums the other day, when you're a good commentator, you don't participate in the narrative of the fight. You don't change it. You don't morph it. You don't guide it. You tell the story. That's what I like to do with my play-by-play. I don't like to lead somebody on somebody winning the fight unless they're winning the fight. Mackenzie Dern is outlanding Virna Jandiroba, so you're going to put it that way. It's not the commentary's job to do that. And I felt this. I felt the presence of the commentary booth, and it bothered me. I don't know whether it was him and the buddy thing with Cormier. It rubbed me the wrong way. But he's $100 millionaire, so I can't really criticize his business moves and speaking abilities. As a schmo that lives, in a crappy apartment in Pennsylvania, I can't really comment on business moves and career tactics. But I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. I'm not far from your thoughts on this, Jay. I'm kind of looking at Rogan. Like, granted, Rogan has had money for a long time. He's been making a boatload of money.
Pays me.
Well, and even outside of the UFC, like he's been making a boatload of money just from the YouTube views on his podcast before signing the Spotify deal. But you get, I liken it to 50 Cent after the vitamin water deal, where like most of his music just wasn't good after that. Like, hey, if I got a call from, from my manager and saying, hey, you've got $100 million now that you didn't yesterday, I might lose motivation too. This show would probably really start to suck, and no matter how much I like it, no matter how passionate I am, you know what, guys? I'm sorry, I'm at the beach. I'm chilling. I didn't take study because fuck it. This is what I do. So I kind of that's the way I'm kind of looking at Rogan. Like this is a rapper who's not in the hood anymore. He lost his sight of the struggle, and he's at the fashion week in Paris now. So he's not on this street shit no more. This is what it looks like to me.
Like Diddy said when they accused him of having ghostwriters, I don't write rhymes, I write checks.
Exactly. Matt, are you ready for the commentary to move on from the Rogan era?
Yeah, but I've been for some time. I will say this. I don't think Rogan has like all of a sudden become bad. I think the fan base has outgrown him more than anything else. I think also the UFC commentary booth has outgrown Rogan. It outgrew Mike Goldberg years ago, and you can argue it outgrew Rogan the second Goldberg left. You can argue that.
Good point.
So I don't really think it's a him issue. I think it's more of an us issue. Like it's not you, it's me in the breakup, right? It's not. It's definitely not you, Rogan. And I do believe that.
Yeah, he's the same guy. It's fair.
The same guy. His style's the same. Like I'll be honest, I did not listen to the entire commentary. I watched the telecast twice, and I only listened to like audio on the telecast one time.
And you're listening to Kid Cudi's album the second time, right?
Oh, absolutely, like on repeat, man. You have no idea.
Katy Perry album? Is that what you said?
I hate you, Jay. But I didn't hear anything in particular that made me go, "Ooh, that was." How could Joe Rogan be so stupid? It was like, oh no, just Joe Rogan being Joe Rogan. And the issue is now you have DC next to him who does the same sort of like average Joe style commentary that Joe Rogan does it better, has better analysis. We like him now more than Joe Rogan. Like, again, we have outgrown Joe. We've outgrown him. Both us as the fans, the UFC, the booth, everything. He is a product of a bygone era. And it's okay that that's a fact. He has a $100 million Spotify deal. He's fine. So I'm totally okay moving past Joe Rogan, who like takes that spot. I don't even know if you need anyone, to be honest. Like Anik and DC are a perfect duo. Like add Michael Bisping on like the small shows. I think he does fine.
Paul Felder is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think he's a little bit overrated, but yeah, he's all right too. I think
Dominic Cruz.
Dominic Cruz has got a little bit annoying, but I still think he brings a lot of analysis to a booth. So again, they already have enough people to like, we can move on. We're fine.
Yeah. And I still wonder why they got rid of Jimmy Smith, but that's
that would be that one
nuts to me. All right. Any last thoughts on the commentary before we move things along?
We both have thoughts. I just like to very briefly say how much I really do appreciate John Anik in his 99% of his pronunciations are spot on. The Jandiroba thing was a little different. Gilbert Burns clarified that, but we're talking straight professional, good on his game, can rattle off betting odds stats about football games like nothing, just he's a consummate professional. And this is a guy that does his homework. And I really do appreciate that. This was here's where it stood out to me, Hunter, on this broadcast more than some others, because we don't hear Rogan as often as we used to. We can hear a guy who is insanely prepared, who spent 6 hours getting ready for the broadcast in Anik, and Rogan wheeled out of bed. That's the feel. That's the kind of the feeling I got of this broadcast, is that Rogan knew the guys he knew and knew the narratives and knew that he knew, oh yeah, I remember watching Cubs once. It just felt like a fan, somebody who used to do this, like a Randy Couture showing up and talking to fights where he hasn't really been there the whole time. That's what I felt like. But Anik we outgrew Goldie and we got Anik, so that's fine by me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that trade off any day. Ben, did you want to say something to wrap this up?
Yeah, just none of this is really criticism of Rogan. These are deep and fast moving waters. This is a hard sport to be able to keep up with, to the point that you can talk about it intelligently off the cuff. I mean, look how often I fail at it, and I do this for a living. But I mean, I can remember back to when Rogan had more time, less money, was more freshly in love with the sport. 15 years ago, there would be somebody in the octagon, and Rogan could tell you about their fights in King of the Cage and Pancrase since their release from the UFC last time, and you can tell that it was not preparation, it was that he had watched those fights.
Yeah.
Like, he has declined over the years. A big deal was made about it, 3-4 years ago, when he said on his show, I have no idea who Sijara Eubanks is. And everyone took that as him dunking on Eubanks, and it was a proximate cause for her being removed from the main event of a UFC. But that was a self-own. That was him showing how much he had fallen out of touch with the sport just from no longer calling fight nights. Because the problem was she had never been on a numbered pay-per-view. So even though she had fought plenty of times, he simply hadn't seen her because he no longer watched the events that he didn't cover. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. He has even more money and even less time now. And so, yeah, him and Cormier, it just sounded like a couple of fans. And Cormier is normally better than that. Rogan makes him terrible.
Yeah, he's such a bad influence on.
Yeah. So I'm normally not that sensitive to commentary booths. None of them bug me that badly, and rarely do they stand out for me. In fact, if I have a lot of work that night, I usually have it muted, and I'm not even listening to the commentary unless I see something get replayed and I want to hear him talk about it, and I'll unmute. So it doesn't really bother me. But for what I listened to on Saturday, yeah, his time is over. I don't think he wants to put in the work anymore to be a good commentator.
And I just want to add to what Jay said as well. John Anik is such a special part of that commentary team. I don't think UFC fans really realize how great he is. As somebody that watches a lot of boxing, that has to deal with Todd Grisham every Saturday.
Just engage
I don't really like that much. You know, like we get a lot of people that are the annoying play-by-play guy, and John Anik is not annoying. He's a nerd. Like he's like one of us in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And he is always prepared. He's always on his game. He never sounds contrived. You know, he never sounds forced. He is the best part of the UFC commentary booth. Without
because he came from Bellator.
Shout out to ESPN MMA Live.
All right. So let's move things along to the greatest title segment in all of media history. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon. So this is where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not. So just for shits and giggles, I should call on Matt, but I'll go to Ben. What is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment this week?
Nothing surprised me this week except for the fight outcome that I've already discussed. So I yield the floor.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Excellent. Jay, what is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment this week?
Well, then I will accept the colleague's time and add it to my own. No, I'm kidding. I won't go that long. I promise. The show's going on long already, but I got a lovely little tale to tell you for an international waters situation. This past week, this is not fight news, like for an event itself. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's office placed sanctions on a bunch of international figures, one of which being Absolute Championship Akhmat head and Chechen head president, whatever his new title is today, essentially warlord, Ramzan Kadyrov. He was sanctioned by the United States Department of Treasury. And what this means is that any Americans doing business with him or with any of his organizations, there were 6 of them that are run by him or through subsidiaries or through that, or his representatives. There's also a list. You can go onto the Department of Treasury's office for the specific things there. But ACA, who some of you might be familiar with, is a big Russian organization for MMA. And Akhmat MMA is a big fight camp. These are both under the purview of Kadyrov and Kadyrov. And this is a significant thing because it means that any US-based fighters or people that are working for there or referees like Herb Dean that go over there cannot be paid by this person. So that means every American will not be able to fight for ACA and get paid unless you go through a real shady situation. I wouldn't mess with that. ACA just crowned its first American champion recently. Tony Johnson, who has bounced around everywhere, Bellator and all that, just won the heavyweight title, I believe, at the end of November. And we know many UFC fighters, American especially, have worked with, have shown up for appearances, have gone to events or whatnot. Weidman and Frank Mir and Verdum and Frankie Edgar and then there's a bunch of other ones like Khabib and Alex Gustafsson and whatnot have ties to him. So this is a huge shakeup in international MMA, and I'm very curious to see how it plays out. And it's important to note that Kadyrov was sanctioned because of his extrajudicial tortures and killings of journalists and of his citizens, especially targeting GLBTQI community, just rounding them up and systematically torturing and killing them. So this is he's not a nice fella. I might have a bounty on my name at the end of this broadcast, but this is something that's been in the works for a long time, and this is a big impact to what's going to happen, because I know the UFC was considering working with M1 Global and then possibly ACA to have like a feeder league. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. So yeah, big news.
Definitely big news, and very bad news for some UFC fighters who wanted that extra Christmas spending money. Matt, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment?
I gotta say, I think that has surprised me the most this week or so, and I'll extend it past couple weeks just to give myself some leniency. I've been on the show for a while, so I can do that. It's got to be the whole Canelo DAZN situation. Like that to me is one of the most peculiar things in combat sports history. You have a guy that, in a sense, got out of both a network and promotional deal in record time. Like, honestly, like it was record time, what makes you think, like, what did he have against Len Blahnik and Oscar that allowed him to get out of those contracts? And then immediately, not immediately, but almost immediately went back to the same network for a one-off fight. It's odd. I'm intrigued by the business side of that deal more than anything, of course, because I think Canelo's going to blow away Callum Smith. But it's one of those things where the industry and the business of boxing just, again, becomes odd. And it makes you think why and ask more questions and look into it. So I'm always intrigued by those situations. And again, surprised by that situation as well. I thought Canelo would never be back with DAZN.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and one of those reasons why I'm really questioning that DAZN subscription now. All right, so my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment comes courtesy of Bloody Elbow and our promoter of the year, Chartry Sitchetong, who also has the LeBron James of MMA on his roster if you follow his Twitter account. But anyway, Bloody Elbow put out a story that went into a lot of investigative work, and they uncovered several threats and coercion and whatnot, just overall dirty, possibly illegal tactics that Chartry Sitchetong has used to keep one championship going the way it's going, and to keep people quiet, to force matches and whatnot. So I mean, we all done heard things. I'll just put it that way, and I am not surprised one bit by any of this. Chartry gonna Chartry. So there it is. But fellas, I want to open up the floor to a brief but more inclusive discussion here, instead of just me hogging this topic just for this segment here. What did you make when you first heard about the work that Bloody Elbow uncovered here?
I believe the first words out of my mouth were probably, I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. Like, we're talking, a lot of these allegations had been out there, had been floating in the ether, had been kind of undocumented claims and concerns, and we've heard things. We've heard bits and pieces going on. We've just heard, backroom situations. Like we heard about the Will Trope situation when he spoke publicly about WADA, and then it circled around to, there may have been some threats and unsubstantiated, we can't substantiate them. Just all sorts of wrong dealings here. And I'm not surprised, because it's it makes it. I don't want to say it makes sense, but I see it. I can see this happening. I can see the zero tolerance criticism. And if you say something negative about the promotion, you will get buried. Especially even though you're an independent contractor, you're still under contract with one championship. So they will be like, well, you trash talk us. So we're going to put you on some some faraway card. Just nowhere, no one's really paying attention to some Indonesian event, and we're going to put it on at 3 at whatever's going on. It's all there wasn't. I'll put it this way: I didn't learn a lot new from this. It more confirmed and put pen to paper for a lot of the things I already knew. Like, for instance, the numbers we laugh about from year to year, from year to year at this point, the billions of potential viewers. And the massive streams numbers, and the fact that one championship has, I think, 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube, but can pull 50,000 views maybe on any given clip. Just fictional. It's all smoke and mirrors, and we know that. And this points it out and kind of clarifies that and says, the numbers, the ratings, the everything. Like, there was the ratings that came out that one championship said that they blew it out of the water for some near year-end show, and Ryzen showed the actual ratings from the television agency or whomever it was over there, essentially the Nielsen in Japan, and saw that one championship was below like ping pong. It was not even in the top 20. It's just, I've railed about one championship enough to know some of these inner situations, and I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons.
Just to echo what you guys are saying, I mean, we kind of knew this in a lot of ways. Either we heard stories about this from sources, from people in the industry. Like, we've just heard enough stories about one championship. And also, it is a fight promotion. Like, there is an element to where, like, you don't think, like if you're a fan out there and you hear this news, I guarantee your favorite promotion does these same things. To a degree, maybe a spectrum of how they do it, but they definitely do all of these to a degree. Even the UFC, we're talking about extremely predatory businesses in a almost unregulated market, to be honest. And then we're talking about, with one championship, a international market on top of that, with Indonesia, with Singapore, that are deeply unregulated market economies as well. You're running into an issue here where this entire system is gonna exploit fighters, is gonna exploit their own employees as well, and it should not be a shock anymore. Like, fighters, if you're heading into MMA, be aware of how much you're getting abused, how much you're getting fucked around, to put it just lightly, right? Like, that's just the reality to it. Whether it's one championship, whether it's Dana White of the UFC, whether it's Scott Coker of Bellator, like, all these promotions are predatory in their design, in their systems, and we have to be honest about that.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really good points there, Matt. I mean, we laugh and joke about the numbers that Chatri throws out there, and some of the accusations made about one. But we can look at the UFC and see the exact same sort of things. Like, we were talking about that press release that one put out about how they, how well they were doing financially.
Oh, the war chest.
Yeah, and then buried into that press release was, but we're letting go of like 40% of our staff. Like, did Dana White not get on that podium and talk about how business is just so wonderful and they're just breaking all these records and business couldn't be better and all stuff, but we got to make roster cuts. So we're looking at the exact same sort of thing. I think the difference is Chatri has done a serious PR job as far as trying to convince people that he's the good guy, he's the nice guy promoter. Dana know he ain't shit, and he's not pretending.
Chatri's cartoonish about it too. Like, that's just the reality too. But he's a little bit like old school, like what's the guy's name from Deadly Do Right? Like Snidely, what's the
Snidely Whiplash?
Yeah.
He's like the Asian Snidely Whiplash. You're just like, he's like a bad businessman. Like, you just can see it. It just oozes from him, that style. And plus, like, in terms of fluffing numbers, think about the UFC pay-per-view buy rates we hear now. First off, that's all behind ESPN Plus. That wall. And we only hear certain events, and all these events do amazing numbers. I mean, Tony Ferguson is now a guy, and Justin Gaethje are now a guy that can do over 1 million pay-per-view buys on ESPN Plus. You know, like, you have to take this as fact, I guess. This is how it is. So it's the same system here, just not, we don't hear 1 billion pay-per-view buys. That's the only difference.
Yeah, I think fair points there. So let's move on to the speed bag, and this is where I get to flex my authority on you, mofo. So let me go ahead, bring up the clock. You each will have 10 seconds to answer the questions, and we're going to go in a round robin. So we're going to keep the action flowing. And let's see here, make sure I have my screen stays on and the volume is up so you guys can hear the bell. Matt, I will begin with you. Kevin Holland versus Khamzat Chimaev for the year in UFC show next week. Yes or hell yes?
Hell fucking yes. Kevin the God Holland, man. I mean, first off, one of the only people from the Contender Series that I like actually like. So shout out to him. And I picked him to beat Jacare. So yes, Kevin Holland for the win.
Hey.
Man, I am all aboard this fight. I like that the UFC is finally pitting two guys that both want to fight next week next to each other, but they got to make that fight. So we're probably not going to get it.
Ben?
Oh, no, only because there's already 15 fights on the card next week, and I'm tired just looking at it.
Dang, I was hoping you would go overtime so I could cut you off there because I just really enjoy doing that. All right, so Jay, this next question first goes to you. Does Bellator book an immediate rematch for McFarlane, or does Juliana Velasquez face Liz Carmouche next?
It depends on the coronavirus rates in Hawaii because Bellator really wants to bring it back to Hawaii. I'm leaning towards McFarlane rematch, and I don't want it.
Ben?
I am with Jay. I think they're going to do it, even though the Carmouche fight makes more sense and would tell us more about the division.
Absolutely. And Matt?
I agree with everyone in everything they said. Yes, we're going to get the McFarlane rematch. We don't want it, but hey, that's what we're going to get.
That was a very boring answer, Matt. All right. So, Ben, you will get this question first. Bellator's light heavyweight division now has Anthony Johnson, possibly Yoel Romero in its ranks as well. Is Bellator stronger at 205 than the UFC now?
If we're assuming John Jones is really gone, they're about even, and that's as close as Bellator is with any division with the UFC. It's close.
Matt?
With John Jones gone and with the idea of Romero being in this division too, which I'm assuming, yeah, probably. I'm going to go yes.
And Jay?
Rumble hasn't fought in 3 years. Romero's like 1-5 in his last fight or whatever. No, it's not because they don't have Yuri Prochazka. They got nothing.
Oh, all right. All right, so now it's time for me to change the clock to 30 seconds. I will answer all 3 questions in succession. The clock will begin after reading the first question. Kevin Holland versus Khamzat Chimaev for the year in UFC show next week, yes or hell yes? Absolutely hell to the yes. Both guys have been making a name for themselves for taking short notice fights. Let's do it. Let's close out this crazy year with something even crazier. Bellator is probably going to go with the immediate rematch, but let's stop doing immediate rematches every time. Give Carmouche the shot. Bellator's light heavyweight division, I wouldn't say it's stronger than the UFC because we got to remember Israel Adesanya is supposed to be fighting for the 205-pound strap. So things will get very, very interesting there. Perfect timing from a perfect man. Let's go ahead and keep this rolling. We've got a couple more things before we close out this longer edition of Unleashed. Cease and desist. Which fight from the upcoming UFC event makes no sense to you? Jay, I will begin with you, sir.
This is a surprisingly well-matched card. And I say surprisingly because we've had some real issues lately with bouts that don't make sense and they're kind of thrown together. And of course, there's late notice issues that make a lot of problems. So you probably have to go down to what was once considered the co-main event, I believe. And I think it's now down to I don't know. The main card has, I think, 6 or 7 fights on it now. So I don't know where it is. The Marcin Tybura, Greg Hardy fight. Now, Marcin Tybura it's just over a 500 fighter in the heavyweight division, and Greg Hardy's Greg Hardy. But Greg Hardy has a bummer of a win over Yorkin De Castro and whatever happened with Maurice Green. And Tybura beat Ben Rothwell, Maxine Grishin, and Sergey Spivak. It's it's here and here. And I don't know, other than the fact that the UFC is desperate to work Greg Hardy up the rankings to kind of put him against relatively low risk fights that he won't get starched in. That, you know, because Marcin Tybura, hey man, you know, he's a Polish heavyweight who clocks in about 250 that only has a 30% knockout rate. You know, this isn't a guy who's going to scare you with his strikes. This is, you know, not something that's big of a deal, and he's very hittable. So this reeks to me of the UFC is desperate to try and put Greg Hardy in the rankings, and I don't like it. No, sir, I don't like it. And no, why? Yeah. Are we done? When are we done with the whole Greg Hardy situation? We've watched him fight enough times in the UFC to know he's probably not going to have a Charles Oliveira type of rebirth and suddenly become a different fighter. I mean, this is a guy who has to be explaining the rules every time he fights. I'm good.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, does he know the rules this time? No. You know, maybe he needs a few more fights at the highest levels to understand them. Matt, pick a fight on this card that just ain't doing it for you.
I do like the card. I'll be honest. I think the card overall is entertaining, especially the main card. Even like the Bilal Muhammad and Diego Lima fight, like I like that. Cesar Eubanks fight, like there's some even on the prelims that I can enjoy. But the Jose Aldo Marlon Vera fight, first off, why are you still in this division, Jose? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? It can't be a fun weight cut. Like, even though he can do it now, I believe he can do it now, obviously, it can't be fun at his age and his tenure to do this extreme weight cut. So why do it? Marlon Vera is a guy that presents nothing for your legacy. He's a scrappy contender with no name value. Like, why are you doing this? Like, if this is one of those matchups where in like boxing, you would never see this happen. Where it would be like Manny Pacquiao fighting Jared Enos or Virgil Ortiz, like a awesome prospect that is knocking out people that you're thinking he still has to work his way up to the top 5. Plus, like, it just doesn't do anything. It's a tough matchup too. That doesn't present any reward for you. Jose Aldo should be in the retirement tour almost. Like, he should be fighting names that we know from his era that he never fought. He should go back up at least to featherweight, if not lightweight, and have some legacy fights. So just have some fun matchups. Have 3 or 4 fights and walk out. Because clearly going towards the title, like having that title run is not in him anymore. I don't think he can win a belt at 135, 145, or 155. So why are we doing this? It makes no sense to me.
You want to know a weird fight that I thought of when Aldo was thinking about going up to 155 for like a test the waters kind of fight, and it worked with me here. Jim Miller. Ooh. I thought for some reason Aldo versus Jim Miller at 155 would be that fight to really know where he is in the division, and it would just be really fun. You know, I just think it'd be a lot of fun.
I wanted to see him versus Eddie Alvarez. That was my dream. But I'm with you 100% on that one, Matt. That's actually the fight I wanted to point out that I didn't like, simply because I wanted to see Aldo take those legacy fights. I wanted him versus Dominic Cruz if he's going to stay at bantamweight. That would be a perfect fight for both of them right now, and a legacy fight for both gentlemen. Ben, what is a cease and desist that you'd like to issue on this card?
Well, I will just echo what Jay and Matt have said, that this is a stunningly well-matched card. I criticized, one of the early December cards, or maybe one of the last ones in November, is just being, this is the garbage card. This is the take the people that they're trying to cut from the roster, just get them that third loss and get them out of here. Like, there were so many fights between multiple people on losing streaks on that particular card. This is the opposite from top to bottom, because, at the top you've got a bunch of top 10 or near top 10 fighters, all the way to the bottom where you've got prospects or people that haven't fought in a while, but they're all intelligently matched. They all make sense. And for the most part, any outcome of the fight is a win-win for the promotion. I'm going to weigh in on Tybura versus Hardy, but I'm going to come at it from a little different angle than Jay. I'm surprised that they're still trying to find Hardy winnable fights. I would have assumed that by now they would be trying to cut bait with Hardy. Just, it's not panned out. He's not become a star. He's not even become an anti-star, because his potential was to be this Brock Lesnar type that people would at least tune in to see if somebody would beat him. Because he was the domestic abuser, the locker room malcontent, who nonetheless was, this brutal, terrifying knockout machine. He's not become that. His fights since his, first 3 fights, the 2 in the Contender Series, have mostly been boring, win or lose. And he has a bunch of just stupid results like no contests and disqualifications because he's not learned the rules of the game. And in a UFC where they're cutting the Juicy A. Formigas, the Corey Andersons, the Yoel Romeros, just because they're like, these guys aren't going to make another title run. They make too much money. We can sign 5 guys from the Contender Series for this much. Snip. I'm surprised they haven't done that to Hardy, because Hardy does not come with a stock, off the showroom floor Contender Series contract. He makes a lot more than that. And I'm frankly surprised that they haven't just given him like a Derek Lewis or an Alistair Overeem just to put an end to this whole thing and give him his walking papers. So that's why I'm surprised and kind of cease and desist about the Tybura fight. Because what if he wins? Then we got to watch his ass again.
We're gonna have to watch him fight like Alexei Oleinik or something. Like I can see the path, the zigs and the zags to get him to become a top 5 fighter with favorable matchups against fighters that maybe not. They might make him fight Shamil Abdurakhimov. Like a top ranked guy that doesn't really pose a big danger. Yeah.
Hard pass.
Tybura is such a marshmallow that if the UFC cut him, I don't even think KSW would sign him. I think they probably revoked his Polish citizenship because he's not violent enough.
All right, so let's keep things moving. Final topic for the day. I mean, on this same card, headlined by Wonder Boy versus Jeff Neal, a fantastic matchup. That is, surprised that Dana was no selling that when he was saying his goodbyes at the press conference Saturday. He don't give a damn about this card apparently, but I care about this.
Why, by the way? I wonder why.
Yeah, 24 weeks in a row. Yeah.
It's been a long.
Yeah, so we're gonna just very, very briefly, one fight that you're really looking forward to on this card. I'm going to go first because I know someone else is going to say what I want to say. Michelle Pereira versus Chaos Williams. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, we have sacrificed for the MMA gods, and they shall provide. Such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful level of violence I expect to see in that fight. Matt, what is one fight that you're looking forward to on this card in particular?
I mean, you know me. I'm a huge Jeff Neal fan. The guy is perhaps one of the best boxers in MMA. Like, honestly speaking, I know that might be a little bit hyperbolic, but it's perhaps the case. The way he sets up his work behind the jab, the way he sets off the center line, it is like textbook boxing stuff that you never see in other MMA fighters. And he's, steadily, I think, created a run towards the top 15, top 10. Stephen Thompson is his best fight to date, even though Stephen Thompson's probably not obviously in his prime. And this is a intriguing style matchup. You have 2 strikers. You have Jeff Neal, who's very much traditionally a boxer. Yes, he can throw kicks in here. He has a decent kicking arsenal, but he's a boxer. Stephen Thompson is not a boxer. So I am like, this is almost like an old school UFC matchup in a way that I love. And plus, I think Jeff Neal wins this, and we see him in a top 5 fight sooner rather than later. And after that, a title fight. I do think he is at least going to be fighting for a title in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I think it's also notable too. Wonder Boy, I think despite not being a boxer and despite having that hands down, traditional karate style, he's done surprisingly well against a lot of the better boxers in MMA. I think about what he did to Jorge Masvidal. I think about another Robert Whittaker as well, one of the better boxers in MMA, and how he handled them. But Jay, what is a fight that you're really looking forward to on this card?
I'm looking forward to the winner of Jeff Neal, Stephen Thompson against Jorge Masvidal. Like, I could see Jeff Neal Masvidal as a great fight, but there's this heavyweight fight that takes place in this card that is really standing out. No, I'm kidding. I'm not gonna. I don't want to take Duffy's. I'm going to go with an absolute one of those fights that I can't see not delivering. It's my lock for fight of the night. just because of the violence quotient that these two guys bring to the table. Obviously, I'm speaking about Marlon Moraes and Rob Font. This is one of those fights they're going to stand in front of each other and try and kick each other in the head at the same time. It's just two bulls crashing together. Moraes, unless something crazy happens and he fights Rafael Assunção and gets stalled out, he's not going to have a boring fight. And Rob Font is going to meet him there. And he's going to do whatever he can. Like this is the kind of like this is like an upgrade to when Rob Font fought Thomas Almeida, and it was just two offense first, defense who cares, let's just get down with it kind of fight. And I am all for it. Like if it's anything like when Rob Font fought John Lineker, sign me up. I'm good with it. I don't really care who wins because I don't think there's a lot at stake, surprisingly, because of the log jam at the top of the division. But I am excited for what's going to happen there. I think that's one of those, I just shut my brain off, punch in what's happening, and enjoy the violence. And I need that.
Yeah, that's going to be a very, very nice one. A great one to close out the year. Ben, what's one fight that you want to highlight on this before we wrap things up?
Well, I certainly appreciate Jay leaving it for me. It was my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons 2 weeks ago when I found out about it, but I am still surprised and very much looking forward to Anthony Pettis versus Alex Morono.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've talked before, and I've certainly talked about how welterweight is probably the hardest division for the not name guys. Apologies to Alex, to break through and get a fight with a name guy, whether that name guy is still in the top 10 or not.
Oh, yeah.
And Pettis is much better than you would think he is right now. I mean, yes, he's no longer the just lightning quicksilver wizard of 2014 that strung together, maybe the best 5-fight streak of diverse offense in MMA history. But he is 3-3 in his last 6 against pure top 10, top 15 fighters in 2 weight classes. I mean, it's Michael Chiesa, Tony Ferguson, Stephen Thompson, Nate Diaz, Diego Ferreira, and Donald Cerrone. Yeah. All top 15, if not top 10 quality fighters. He's 3-3. He's coming off a win. It is rare that a guy with Anthony Pettis' name, and he's probably got one of the 10 or 15 biggest names in the promotion, takes a step down in perceived name value off of a win. But he beat Donald Cerrone, and now he's taking on Alex Morono. Great opportunity for Morono because, again, as hard as it is to break through and get a name, this is the hardest division to actually break through that glass ceiling into the top 15. Morono is 7-3 in the UFC. This would be by far his best win, by far his biggest name. Fantastic opportunity for him. As always, I rep Houston. He's a good guy. I consider him a friend. So, whoever wins, 2 of my favorite fighters to watch. Can't wait for it.
All right, very good bit of biased journalism there from Ben.
Hey, so, as long as you admit your bias,
it's all good.
Out for that Fortis MMA, boys.
It's all good. Oh yeah, sound like Well, anything about Fortis, yeah, that's Matt Wells' territory. So we don't encroach on Matt the Greater's territory. All right, so that is going to do it for this edition of Unleash. Big thank you to the homie Matt Hunter, aka Matt the Lesser, the hipster, for joining us today. Definitely looking forward to having you back on. So we'll make that happen as soon as possible. And Jay and Ben, you know where to find their work on Sherdog.com. You can check out Matt on Mixed Combat Radio, doing shows every day. And yeah, he's got a lot to say. So listen, and you know where to find my work, MMA on Point. And the Body Lock. I was like, well, I just kind of forgot. I just do a lot of work and I have a day job and everything. Just a lot of things going on in my life. But anyway, follow us on Twitter. You see the handles right there. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Stay beautiful, stay positive, and always stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.